The Red Comet and the Flood. A Tale of Perdido Alma. Chapter 1. Incarcerated. Perdido Alma sat on the edge of his bunk, his head in his hands. The thin mattress beneath him offered no comfort, and the constant hum of the jail's fluorescent lights buzzed in his ears like a swarm of angry bees. His cellmate, a wiry man named Rico, snored loudly on the top bunk, oblivious to the storm raging inside Perdido's mind. It had been 6 months since his arrest. 6 months since he'd seen the red comet streak across the sky as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. That moment felt like a lifetime ago, yet the memory burned as brightly as the comet itself. He had been chasing another high, another fleeting escape from the void inside him, when the police had caught him with a handful of illegally obtained pain pills. Now he was here, trapped in a concrete box, paying the price for his addiction. The television in the common area droned on, the news anchor's voice cutting through the din of shouting inmates and clanging metal doors. Perdido glanced up, his eyes drawn to the screen. The red comet was still the headline, its fiery tail now a permanent fixture in the night sky. Scientists were baffled, calling it a once-in-a-millennium event. But Perdido didn't care about the science. To him, the comet was a symbol, a harbinger of the chaos that had defined his life. He thought of his mother, her tear-streaked face on the other side of the glass during their last visit. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" she had asked, her voice breaking. "Why do you keep doing this to me?" He had no answer, only the same empty promises he'd made 100 times before. "This is the last time, Mom. I'll get clean. I'll do better." But deep down, he knew the truth. He was trapped in a cycle he couldn't break. The younger ones, his siblings, weighed heavily on his mind too. He had failed them, just as he had failed himself. They looked up to him once, saw him as a role model. Now he was nothing but a cautionary tale, a living reminder of what not to become. The shame was suffocating, a weight that pressed down on his chest until he could barely breathe. And then there were the cravings, the relentless hunger that gnawed at his insides. Even in jail, with no access to pills, the desire was there, a constant ache that no amount of time or distance could dull. He had tried to fill the void with drugs, but all they had done was dig it deeper, leaving him emptier than before. Chapter 2. The Earthquake. The ground beneath him trembled, jolting him from his thoughts. At first he thought it was his imagination, a side effect of withdrawal or lack of sleep. But then the tremors grew stronger, shaking the entire cell block. Rico woke with a start, nearly falling off the top bunk. "What the hell is that?" Rico shouted, his voice tinged with panic. Perdido didn't answer. He was already on his feet, gripping the bars of the cell for balance. The other inmates were shouting now, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and confusion. The lights flickered, and somewhere in the distance, he heard the sound of glass shattering. The television screen went black for a moment, then flickered back to life. The news anchor's face was pale, her usual calm demeanor replaced by wide-eyed terror. "We're receiving reports of a massive earthquake," she said, her voice trembling. "The epicenter appears to be off the coast, and there are reports of a tsunami forming. Authorities are urging residents in low-lying areas to evacuate immediately." Perdido's heart sank. The jail was just off the coast, a fact he had never given much thought to until now. The inmates began to scream, their voices blending into a single deafening roar. "Let us out!" they shouted, pounding on the bars of their cells. "You can't leave us here to die." But the correctional officers were gone, their posts abandoned. Perdido watched as one of the guards, a man he had seen every day for the past 6 months, sprinted down the hallway without a backward glance. The inmates' cries grew more desperate, their pleas turning to curses. Chapter 3. The Wave. The television screen went black again, and this time it didn't come back on. The tremors had stopped, but the air was thick with tension, the kind that precedes a storm. Perdido stood frozen, his mind racing. He thought of his mother, of his siblings, of all the people he had let down. He thought of the red comet, its fiery tail a warning he had ignored. And then he heard it. A low, rumbling sound, like thunder but deeper, more primal. It grew louder, closer, until it seemed to shake the very walls of the jail. The inmates fell silent, their faces pale with fear. The wave hit with the force of a freight train, shattering windows and tearing through walls. Water surged into the cell block, rising rapidly as the inmates screamed and clawed at the bars of their cells. Perdido barely had time to take a breath before the water reached him, cold and unforgiving. He fought to stay afloat, but the current was too strong, pulling him under and tossing him like a rag doll. As the water closed over his head, Perdido's thoughts turned to the choices he had made, the consequences he had tried so hard to escape. He had spent his life running from his pain, only to find himself drowning in it. And now, as the darkness closed in, he realized there would be no second chances, no redemption, only the cold, crushing embrace of the ocean. Chapter 4. The Aftermath. The world changed in the wake of the tsunami. Coastal cities were reduced to rubble, their streets filled with debris and bodies. The red comet, once a source of wonder, became a symbol of doom, its fiery tail a reminder of the fragility of human life. In the years that followed, survivors spoke of the wave as a reckoning, a force of nature that had swept away the old world and left behind a blank slate. But for those who had known Perdido Alma, his story served as a different kind of warning, a tale of choices and consequences, of a man who had tried to outrun his pain only to be consumed by it. And on the shores of what was once the county jail, the waves still whisper his name, a haunting reminder of the price of addiction and the cost of redemption.